Hello, my name is Mary Ellen Powers, and today I have with me Ben Idzikowski, who is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin, here with me to talk about religion. The reason I chose Ben was because we both grew up in very similar backgrounds. We ended up with very different opinions as adults. So we both went to private school, kindergarten through 8th grade, and we were both the youngest in the order of a large Catholic family. Despite these similarities, we have grown into very different belief systems. So Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit about yours?
Well, most people would guess that since I was raised in a Catholic family and went to a private school, that I would still be holding on to a lot of my Christian beliefs, but that's actually exactly opposite of the case. Instead of being Christian, I'm actually an agnostic atheist.
Gotcha. So tell me about atheism and, in particular, agnostic atheism. Kind of what's the difference?
Atheism is the complete lack of belief in God.
Okay.
Most atheists just don't believe in a God whatsoever and will never take any religious beliefs on just faith.
Okay.
I'm an agnostic atheist, which means I deny the existence of a God that's represented in religion, like our Judeo-Christian God. But I'm agnostic to the point where I do not deny the possibility of a God. I don't deny the possibility of something that could appear to be godlike.
Okay. Gotcha. So we'll get back to that in a second. So it sounds like it's the lack of a Judeo-Christian, but still there's something there, that there's some kind of higher power, correct?
Yeah, you can say that.
Okay, gotcha. So when did you have this change of view? How old were you?
I was 13.
13. Okay, so that was pretty young. So what caused this change? What event or people or?
I actually started really questioning my beliefs after a few tragic events, but mainly after a friend of mine had decided to take his own life.
Oh goodness. Okay, so when was that? That was when you were 13 then? Or? Okay. Wow. Okay, so do you know why he decided to take his life? Or okay, so what really caused that change for you? Why did that make that influence?
I could never really picture someone of his good nature and how he treated people going to hell for all of eternity. Because according to Catholicism, if you commit suicide, you go to hell. And you go to the worst parts of hell. And I will refuse for the rest of my life to believe that.
Sure. Absolutely, especially if he was a good friend of yours.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was kind of the big changer. So what happened after that? What really caused that change, and how did you learn agnostic atheism? Like, why was that how did you end up there, I guess?
Well, there's no definitive proof of God. First of all, other than the Bible and hearsay.
Sure.
And at the same time, I can't deny stories that have been told for thousands of years by thousands of millions of people.
Absolutely.
So I can't put every single amount of faith into question. However, there is no proof of it. So probably the biggest thing for me is my studies and kind of how I developed after that.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your studies. Now you're scientific. You were a genetics major here at UW.
Yep, I graduated with a degree in genetics, and a lot of it probably had to do with my study of evolution and human genomics. You just look at the evidence for evolution and whatnot, it completely contradicts the story of Genesis in the Bible. Most Christians, if they're fundamentalists and believe every single word, they believe that this earth is only about 6,500 years old.
Right.
But if you look at fossil records and carbon dating, it shows that the earth is 4.2 billion years old. And there are a lot of Christians that believe that as well, that there's a God that still produced that. But for me, there's just a lack of evidence for it. If you look at just DNA proof, evolution shows that it can occur just through natural selection and nature itself.
Okay. So it sounds like what you're saying is Well, I mean, yeah, let me make sure I have this clear. So it's a lot of the science behind it. You know, there's no proof to say that there is a God or that there necessarily isn't a God
Yeah.
at the same time. Okay. So, so you really don't have a definite, figure that you look up and say, oh, thank goodness, that kind of thing. Gotcha. So, who do you think were the biggest influencers, in creating this and creating this belief system for you?
Well, first off, surprisingly, would probably be my parents.
Mhm.
I was fortunate enough to have parents that, even though they weren't happy with the fact that I'm an agnostic atheist, they still supported me, and
Sure.
they still allowed me to have an open mind and didn't tell me elsewise.
Mm-hmm.
So thankfully, I have good parents in that regard.
Absolutely.
Probably, though, some of the biggest influences are just authors that I've read and scientists throughout history. One of the biggest is probably Dawkins, Richard Dawkins right now. Who's an author, pretty big proponent in the atheist movement today.
Okay. Gotcha. And no, I haven't heard of him before.
He's an author and a geneticist. He is a very big proponent for showing scientific evidence in contradiction to the Bible and to religious faith.
Okay, so he really takes it side by side and says, here's what the Bible says and here's how it's not possible?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so that really gives you a whole different, a whole contradiction to a lot of what you were raised upon, a lot of the beliefs and concepts and the morals and everything else. I mean, how do you think that's affected who you are today, who you are now?
I actually personally believe it's made me a better human being. Most people would argue that without religion you can't develop morals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not true. If you really think about it, morals are just developed through human interaction.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you look at it purely as an evolutionary standpoint, it actually makes more sense for people to work together so that they can survive longer and produce more children.
Almost a survival of the fittest, kind of.
And out of that, I believe, is what developed into moral systems. Don't kill each other, don't steal from each other because it's going to cause you to be angry, and
Right.
et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And the reason I think it's made me a better person is because I think it makes me value my life a lot more. I don't really have any belief in an afterlife, although I don't really deny it. I don't know what happens after I die, but
Sure.
most people, if you're an atheist, believe nothing happens. And if nothing happens, well, I'm not going to know about it. That's not really going to be an issue. But at the same time, that makes me realize that I only live once. And that makes me just have to value my relationships and my experiences a lot more.
Absolutely. Yeah, if there is no reincarnation, if there is no afterlife, here we are, here and now. Let's make the most of it. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for joining me with this discussion on religion. It makes me think a lot more about kind of the way that I was raised and how it can change into a whole different perspective. So I appreciate you meeting with me. Have a good rest of your day.